Part 12. Why are all of them passive skills? Author, Bulletin G. Bayet. Chapter 113. Yejing looked at the 9-square grid on the furnace and fell into deep thought. Can the omega sublight be stored in it? Can this 9-square grid withstand the energy erosion of the omega sublight? I don't know. Let's try it first. Yejing took out a spiritual stone and threw it into one of the grids in the 9-square grid, and then exited the furnace space. After a few seconds, he returned to the furnace space. The spiritual stone was still in the 9-square grid, quietly moving. It seems that this 9-square grid can really store items. As long as the items are not combined, they can be kept in it. This is a brand new discovery. If you get any inconvenient good things in the future, you can throw them in here. It's very secret. Pa. Yejing shook his head suddenly. Is it time to think about this now? The place to store omega sublight has been found. As long as this 9-square grid can withstand the energy erosion of omega sublight, everything will be easy. Do it? Still not doing it? Fight? Still not fighting? Of course he fought. This is the only chance to take away the omega sublight with a trick. If the omega sublight really falls on the lonely city, after a huge loss, it will still belong to others. There is no chance for him at all. The way has been found, but how to get close to the omega sublight? I can't fly either. Yejing was stuck, and his eyes inadvertently glanced at Gray, who had taken Huifei away before, and his eyes suddenly lit up. Isn't this the right tool? Yejing's wolf-like eyes made Gray tremble all over, and he subconsciously turned his head to look at Yejing and asked, "What? Birdman, come here, come here." Yejing waved at Gray. "I have a name, Gray." Gray said unhappily, but he was still very curious about what Yejing was doing, and walked over slowly. "Why are you looking for me?" Yejing put his arm around Gray's shoulders and brushed off the dust on his shoulders in a very intimate manner. If Gray hadn't asked him to retract his wings, he might have even picked the lice for him. "Send me down," Yejing said with a smile. Just 4 words, jokingly, but expressed his great determination. "Gray, what did you say?" Gray was confused, his brain short-circuited, as if he didn't understand what Yejing meant. "I said, send me down." Yejing put his hands on Gray's shoulders, and the two faced each other, eye to eye. Yejing's unwavering expression was reflected in Gray's blue eyes. "You said you want to go down." Gray was surprised, pointed to the ground, and said in shock, "You want to get off the planetary fragments? What are you going to do? Go to the sky? I have a way to stop the omega sublight, as long as you send me to it," Yejing said with a calm face and a steady tone. Gray looked Yejing up and down for a few times, and said in disbelief, "Do you have a way? What can you do? You are a person with a lower realm than me, what can you do?" He was full of disbelief in Yejing. This was not contempt, but unrealistic. "Pa." Yejing slapped Gray on the back and said impatiently, "Why are you asking so many questions? Just send me over. Leave the rest to me." "Impossible. It's too dangerous for me. It's very likely that I won't be able to fly back after flying down." Gray shook his head and refused. More than 10 minutes passed. At his flying speed, it would take at least half an hour to catch up, and at least an hour to fly to the planetary fragments. "My big baby, the endurance can't keep up." However, when Yejing heard Gray's words, his eyes suddenly lit up. "You said it's possible, but it doesn't mean you can't fly back." This. Gray was stunned and speechless. Seize the opportunity to pursue the victory. Without Gray, Yejing himself would never be able to get near the omega sublight. "He can't fly at all." Yejing put his arm around Gray's shoulders and said in a seductive tone, "You come from a big power, right? Think about it, the Federation's airships can't possibly reach Lonely City on time, and the Omega Light will definitely fall first, right? Gray hesitated slightly, but still nodded, yes. He also heard the previous conversation, and the Omega Light would definitely fall into Lonely City before the large spacecraft. So, that's hundreds of thousands of lives. If they are saved, what a great honor. Just think about it. A great credit. A great honor. Just the two of us. Although he didn't guarantee whether it would succeed, he had to say so now to confuse Gray to take the flight. This. Gray was obviously moved, and the hesitation and struggle on his face deepened, but, with more than an hour of flight time, I can't do it. Pa pa pa. Yejing hit Gray's back several times, causing him to cough several times. Then, his face straightened and he said, a man can't say no. This is a gamble. You bet that I have a way to deal with the Omega sublight, and I bet that you can fly over. God's glory. Supreme honor. I bet. What about you? Hiss. Gray took a breath and looked at the determined Yejing with a shocked face. After a moment of silence, he seemed to have made up his mind, and a great spirit suddenly surged up. I bet. Take you to fly. Just as he finished speaking, Yejing smiled and handed over a bottle filled with black liquid, saying, come on, drink it. Gray, dot. Poison? What for? Gray was confused. Swish, Yejing took the bottle of black liquid back and said with a smile, in order not to make you too nervous, just do it casually to ease the atmosphere. Okay, let's get started, time waits for no one. Gray, dot. What kind of brain circuit is this? He complained without meaning, but he took out a yellow bottle of potion from the storage bracelet, gritted his teeth, and drank it up. What if a man can't last long enough? What if a man can't do it? Answer, take drugs. 1 bottle refreshes the mind, 2 bottles never get tired, and 3 bottles make you immortal. After drinking a bottle of potion, Gray's whole body swelled, and his pale face instantly became ruddy, as if he was congested, and his head was 3 inches bigger. Suddenly, a pair of white wings exclusive to birdmen stretched out from behind him, mutated his body, and spread his wings. Hold me. Gray stretched out his hand to Yejing. Hand in hand. The next second later, Gray held Yejing's hand, and under the surprised and puzzled gaze of the crowd, he flew down the planet fragments, chasing the Omega sublight, and fell straight down. These two kids. Chang Jiao was slightly stunned, and just wanted to say something, but Sali Hui shook his head and fell silent again. At this time, if there was a glimmer of hope, they would not choose to stop it. Why are all of them passive skills? Author, Bulletin G. Bayet. Chapter 114. What does it feel like to fly? Yejing gave the answer. It was a feeling of Yejing's whole body was suspended in the air, without any landing point, floating and fluttering, and an inexplicable sense of panic arose spontaneously. Humans are born to be stable only when they are down to earth, and they cannot settle down in the empty air. Yejing held Gray's hand tightly, and it hurt, for fear that Gray would accidentally throw him down. The boundless universe, if it is really lost, where can I find it? Gray fell straight down, and the speed of falling was very fast. This was to catch up with the Omega sublight. At this time, the Omega sublight had been falling for more than 10 minutes. If they were to catch up, their speed must be a few points faster than the speed of the Omega sublight. Although the speed was very fast, Gray had obviously practiced, and the frequency of the wing vibration was very low, only once every few seconds, which could greatly reduce the consumption of the wings and improve endurance. Yejing felt that he was falling rather than flying. Besides having a pair of wings that could keep him balanced, Yejing felt that he could do it. Of course, he was really falling. It was dark right below, like a deep black hole. Nothing could be seen. The fragment of the blue star in the lonely city was still too far away, and even the rough outline could not be seen. About half an hour later, Yejing could clearly feel that Gray's falling speed was much slower, and the frequency of his wings trembling was even slower, from once every few seconds to once every 10 seconds. Half an hour had passed, and he couldn't stand it anymore, but right below, he couldn't even see the shadow of the light spot of the Omega sublight. Yejing couldn't help but worry, "Can you still hold on?" Gray felt a slight tremor on his wings, and endless fatigue, and gritted his teeth and said, "I can hold on." Then, he took out a small yellow bottle and poured it into his mouth. Instantly, he was in high spirits and never tired. People who take drugs are still strong. After drinking a bottle of unknown potion, Gray instantly regained his spirit, increased his speed, and became vigorous again. Yejing couldn't help but wonder, what kind of medicine is this? Gray said without looking back, "Aphrodisiac." Yejing, dot. Although it was not the time to talk about these things, Yejing couldn't help but give Gray a thumbs up. Powerful. Really powerful. Extremely powerful. Gray narrowed his eyes and smiled, "When you come to the Magic City that day, I will treat you to a 3-hit healthcare." Healthcare. Yejing's eyes lit up, and he opened his mouth to say something, but suddenly his face changed suddenly, and his eyes stared straight down. A very conspicuous and dazzling light spot was reflected in his pupils. "I see it!" Yejing shouted, pulling Gray's clothes with one hand, very excited. After more than half an hour, he finally saw the target. If he couldn't see it again, he would really think he had fallen to the wrong place. Yejing's shout frightened Gray so much that his whole body shuddered, his body became unstable, his wings trembled violently, and he almost threw Yejing out. After stabilizing his body, Gray also looked down, his eyes almost popped out. Finally caught up. It was just a light spot, a very small light spot, and the two sides were still about 2 kilometers away. But no matter what, he finally caught up. In excitement, Gray drank another bottle of small yellow medicine, his brain was directly congested, veins on his body were bulging, and his whole body was boiling. Instant. With a whoosh, his head rushed down and fell straight down. About 20 minutes later. "It's right in front of us. The Omega sublight is right in front of us, and the void-like space wraps her up, and the light-colored particles flowing around her are clearly visible. Not only that, below, a piece of dim land fragment that can only be seen in virtual shape emerged. Even in the high sky, you can feel how large its area is." Gray kept his eyes on the Omega sublight, and his body kept moving non-stop, slowly approaching the Omega sublight. This time he learned to be smart, paying attention to the distance between his body and his wings, for fear that he would accidentally smell the smell of braised chicken wings again. At this time, Yejing, who originally seemed very relaxed, also changed. There was no smile on his face, and he was extremely serious and solemn. His forehead was covered with a layer of sweat, and his pale and bloodless lips were pursed to release the tension in his heart. His heart beat faster and his adrenaline surged suddenly, and he was extremely nervous. No matter how he imagined it before, he was really nervous when it came to the real chapter. Yejing exhaled deeply, forced himself to calm the tension in his heart, relaxed his emotions, pressed down his trembling hands, and began to simulate the steps in his mind. He only had only one chance to succeed. When he was 2 meters away from the Omega sublight, Gray suddenly said with a serious face, "I can't get any closer, my wings can't bear it." The Omega sublight seemed to have entered another state. The light particles flowing around it were several times brighter than before. The energy of death and destruction emitted from it also spread and radiated to the surrounding 2 meters. If a person entered between these 2 meters, he could still hold on for a few seconds, but if his wings stepped into these 2 meters, he would probably be annihilated in an instant. 2 meters. Yejing looked at the Omega sublight in front of him in a daze, just within reach. He was stunned for a moment, and stretched out his arms in a very cute way. He couldn't reach it. He was still 1.5 meters away. How can 2 meters be broken? I'm only 1.5 meters. Yejing screamed. It was already within reach, but he couldn't touch it. This was the most uncomfortable. He gritted his teeth, and a trace of cruelty flashed in his eyes. When I get ruthless, I'm afraid of myself. You hold steady, I'll jump over. You catch me after I'm done. Yejing said fiercely, being thousands of feet above, if he jumps, he must have great courage. Yeah. Gray nodded, clenched his fists. He was also nervous at this moment, wondering if Yejing could stop the fall of Omega sublight. Then he saw Yejing climb up his back with both hands, stepped on his back, and his dirty shoes touched his white wings. Gray. Gray had no expression on his face. My name is not Gray, but Mo de Ching Ching. I am not a dragon. Can you be a dragon rider if you ride me? Yejing stood on Gray's back with both feet for about a minute before he stabilized his feet and body. Falling parallel, Yejing's eyes were on the Omega sublight, and he clenched his fists without hesitation. The abyss below. The boundless universe below. The light of destruction ahead. Everything is annihilated ahead. Yejing aimed at the Omega sublight. Jump down resolutely. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Why are all of them passive skills? Author, Bulletin G. Bayet. Chapter 115. A Leap of Faith. With a distance of less than 2 meters and just 1 second, Yejing felt as if a century had passed, very slowly. Everything, in his eyes, seemed to be in slow motion, slowed down countless times. The dazzling brilliance and speckled light particles were so close at hand, and the beam of light reflected in the black pupils looked very sacred. 1 meter. When Yejing's arms and body entered the 1 meter area, his body suddenly stagnated. His face, which was still a little bloody, instantly turned pale and bloodless, and his dark and shiny hair turned white without warning. In the blink of an eye, a head of white hair. The vitality contained in Yejing's body was instantly drained. His whole body suddenly became sluggish, his pupils were dim, and the skin and muscles on his body looked much older. Not only that, all the spiritual energy in his body failed. The hidden spiritual energy flowing in the body was frozen instantly. The spiritual energy in his body seemed to be deflated, disappearing at an extremely fast speed. Before Yejing could react, it had already disappeared. Yejing felt the drastic changes in his body, his face suddenly changed, and he panicked slightly. The price is too high? Yejing's eyes were fixed on the Omega light that was right in front of him. He gritted his teeth hard and held back a breath in his heart. If this fails, there will be no chance of turning around. Yejing's outstretched arm got closer and closer. 50 centimeters. 30 centimeters. 20 centimeters. 10 centimeters. The closer to the Omega sublight, the more serious the changes in Yejing's body. The skin on the palms and arms aged at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the muscles atrophied, turning into a mere skin and bones arm. 5 centimeters. 4 centimeters. 1 centimeter. The light reflected in Yejing's eyes shone brighter and brighter, making it difficult for him to even open his eyes. However, he still endured the sting and forced his eyes open, wide open, not wanting to miss this moment. Got it? Yejing's wretched and old fingers finally touched the light particles circulating around the Omega sublight. At the moment of contact, Yejing's face changed wildly, and a look of panic instantly appeared in his eyes. Sure enough, an unbelievable scene happened. When his finger touched the Omega sublight, War was not triggered. No trigger. The finger he touched the Omega sublight disappeared in an instant. It was as if it had never existed, as if Yejing had always been 4 fingers and was directly annihilated. More than that. As his fingers were annihilated, faint light particles covered his palms. Immediately afterwards, his palm began to disappear. The fingers, palms, and palms turned into spots of light, transformed into the original form in the universe, and were directly reset to original energy. Following the palm of his hand, Yejing's entire arm did the same and began to annihilate. From the point where the palms are connected, it slowly annihilates towards the upper body. Sorry. Yejing cursed in his heart when he saw the arm disappearing into raw energy. Something went wrong. This is not a fatal injury. This is not a fatal injury. From the time he touched the Omega sublight until now, only half of his arm has disappeared, which is not enough to be fatal, so War of Sorrow cannot be triggered at all. Half of the arm is gone. One-armed. Yejingzi felt that his brain was blank, buzzing, he had no thoughts, and was extremely panicked. Hiss. Yejing suddenly bit the tip of his tongue, and a little blood rushed into his mouth. The severe pain calmed his mind. Is this the end? Impossible. Yejing's body suddenly tilted, and the arm that had not completely disappeared was instantly pressed onto the surface of the Omega light. In the blink of an eye. Arm annihilation. Really one-armed. But at the same time, Yejing's consciousness was running rapidly, and when he touched the surface of Omega sublight, he screamed wildly in his heart. Transfer to the furnace space. Open combination. Put it in combination. 3 thoughts. A moment. At the same time as Yejing's arm disappeared, there was also Omega sublight. After spending a lot of life force and breaking an arm, he finally transmitted the Omega sublight into the furnace space. Yejing didn't have time to check his own condition. At the same second, when the Omega light entered the furnace space, his consciousness also turned into it. Was it successful? There was no concealed look of anxiety on Yejing's face. After entering the furnace space, he directly set his sights on the 9-square grid of the combination. When I saw the light group in the 9-square grid, I instantly breathed a sigh of relief. My heart, which had been held in my throat, relaxed, and my tense spirit relaxed. Success. 9 palaces in the grid. That is just a small piece of light 1/millionth of the Omega beam. It is quietly and firmly placed in the 9-square grid. There is no other movement. It is very stable. This 9-square grid can suppress the Omega sublight. Yejing relaxed, and his whole body relaxed. Gray was only a few meters away from Yejing. His eyes were always on Yejing, his expression was very nervous, his fists were clenched tightly, and there was a drop of sweat. He was not sure whether Yejing could succeed, he was just betting again. When Yejing's fingers touched the Omega sublight, his heart was in his throat, and he was extremely nervous. When Yejing's arm disappeared, he looked ashen, thinking that it was over, and he had failed. Who knows? The next second, it was like riding a roller coaster, turning infinitely. When he saw Yejing's arm disappear, the Omega sublight also disappeared. Right in front of his eyes, right in front of him, it disappeared. Nothing was left, as if it had never appeared. It disappeared directly. When he saw the Omega sublight disappear, Gray was stunned and couldn't believe it. He rubbed his eyes hard with both hands and looked over again, fearing that it was an illusion. When he looked over again, his heart beat suddenly, and his expression changed instantly, from despair to excitement. Success. It's really gone. The Omega sublight really disappeared. Then he saw Yejing's body soften and fall from the air. He was so scared that he hurriedly flapped his wings and reached out to catch Yejing. However, when he was about to hug Yejing, suddenly, an unexpected scene happened. He couldn't touch Yejing at all. Gray's eyes widened, his big blue eyes bulged. He didn't know what happened. No matter how he tried, he couldn't touch Yejing. It was as if Yejing and he didn't exist in the same space. It was as if he and Yejing didn't exist on the same world line. They could see each other, but couldn't touch each other. In his anxiety, he forced out Gray's native language from 100 years ago. What's going on? Why are all of them passive skills? Author, Buletin Bayet. Chapter 116. Yejing's body seemed to be unaffected by any force, falling straight down, and the speed of falling was getting faster and faster. Gray flapped his wings wildly and barely caught up. Even so, his arms blocked wildly and swayed in the air for a while, but he couldn't touch Yejing. As Yejing fell faster and faster, he was about to lose him. Yejing. When Yejing withdrew from the furnace space, his consciousness returned. When he saw that he was still falling and was not caught by Gray, he was confused and panicked. Where are my wings? Where is Gray? He looked up and saw Gray panting, flapping his wings wildly, his face flushed, and he chased him with all his strength. Yejing was shocked. You catch me. When Gray saw that Yejing was awake, he was crying without tears, I can't catch you. Yejing. What do you mean by can't catch you? Yejing was panicked. Big brother, don't make a fuss. What the hell is can't catch you? At this time, Yejing subconsciously checked his own condition and was stunned. When the Omega sublight entered the furnace space, it actually left something behind. What was the situation at that time? When the Omega sublight entered the furnace space, there were still a few light particles on his annihilated arm. Those light particles, whose function was unknown, were still attached to his body, and the space around him was completely virtual. He is now just like the Omega sublight before, his body seems not to be in this space, and the surrounding space cannot be touched. This situation really made Yejing dumbfounded. What should I do? I won't really replace the Omega sublight and fall directly to the lonely city, right? Although I don't have the power of Omega sublight to destroy everything, I can't do this. I am immortal. Yejing was horrified, and suddenly looked at Gray, who was chasing him relentlessly, and shouted, You should think of a way. Gray also saw the light particles flowing on Yejing's body, and his heart suddenly jumped. Let me think of a way. What can I do? Gray thought about it, took out a spiritual stone and smashed it on the light particles. In an instant, the spiritual stone turned into ashes and disappeared without a trace, which scared Gray so much that he broke into a cold sweat. No way. Just a few light spots have such a terrifying power, what else can I do? Gray hesitated and said tentatively, or, you go down and try. What if you don't die from the fall? Yejing almost cried when he heard it, and shouted, You won't die from the fall? Try this height. He looked down, and his eyes suddenly darkened, and his brain was dizzy. How high is this? He must be smashed into a pulp. Dead. Dead. That's not right. Yejing's eyes suddenly lit up, and he remembered something very important. When he touched the Omega sublight just now, Battle of Sorrow was not triggered. In other words, the Battle of Sorrow with a cooling time of 3 days can still be used. He won't die. When he thought that he still had Battle of Sorrow, his original panic was swept away, and his face was replaced with a relaxed look. Why save skills and big moves? Isn't it just to save your life at the critical moment? Yejing waved at Gray and said nonchalantly, Okay, you don't have to save me, I can handle it myself. Gray. Gray asked in confusion, What do you mean you can handle it yourself? Yejing snorted and smiled, I can handle this height by myself, don't worry about me, I will go home directly in a while. Gray looked at Yejing doubtfully, he didn't know what Yejing had in his hand that could make him ignore the fall of this height. He thought about it and decided that he couldn't be so disloyal and leave alone, so he kept flying beside Yejing to prevent other people from appearing. When he couldn't keep up with the speed, he gritted his teeth, drank a bottle of aphrodisiac, and forced himself to go up, trying to fall to Guken together with the other two. Yejing knew that he would not die, with a relaxed smile on his face, humming a little tune, twisting his body, changing to an extremely comfortable position and floating in the air, waiting for the time to reach Guken. Then, Gray also contacted Li Hui and Chang Jiao on the planet fragments and reported what had just happened. After the communication was connected, Gray spoke first without waiting for Li Hui and Chang Jiao to speak. The Omega sublight has been solved, and it will not fall to Guken. Suddenly, there was a silence on the other side of the communicator, and the rapid breathing sound was clearly audible. At the same time, Li Hui and Chang Jiao said in unison, "What did you say? What happened?" Gray scratched the back of his head and stammered, "It was Yejing, the young man I took down before, who lost the Omega sublight at the cost of an arm." There was another silence. Then Li Hui's solemn voice came from the communicator. "Gone? How did it disappear?" Gray looked confused. "I don't know either." He turned his head and looked at Yejing, and asked, "How did the Omega sublight disappear?" "This." Yejing hesitated, and he certainly couldn't say that he had hidden it, so he could only say something else. He thought about it, and said with certainty, "Teleport. I have a random teleportation scroll." The Omega sublight was teleported away. "That's right, that's it." After Yejing finished speaking, he nodded. He would say the same thing to anyone who asked in the future. Anyway, they couldn't find it, so whatever I said was fine. Don't believe it? Go and look for it. Although Gray didn't believe it, he still reported honestly. He said he had a random teleportation scroll and teleported the Omega sublight away. Li Hui. Chang Xiao. On the planet fragments, the two looked at each other and saw disbelief in each other's eyes. What a coincidence! But at this moment, they both breathed a sigh of relief and touched their foreheads soaked with cold sweat. Solved. The Federation's spacecraft hasn't arrived yet, and this is solved. It's a bit unbelievable, it's a fantasy. However, they both knew that Gray would not make such a joke. So now it's not about how to get rid of the Omega sublight, but it has been informed to the Federation and the citizens of Lonely City that the crisis has been resolved. Li Hui paused and said, "Where are you two now?" Gray said, "They should be landing in Guken soon." Li Hui responded and said, "Then you two should be careful. It's not clear in the communication, but one thing is certain, what belongs to you two will not be lost, and, on behalf of Guken, I will also give you a reward." At the same time, Chang Jiao's words came over. Not only that, Chang Tian Group will also offer a generous reward. Why are all of them passive skills? Author, Bulletin Ji Bayet. Chapter 117. The voices of the two big guys reached the ears of Gray and Yejing through the communicator, making them extremely excited. Yejing thought to himself, "I am just waiting for your words. Otherwise, I will make myself miserable." He looked at what he looked like now. His body was stiff, his skin was old, his hair was white, he could no longer be erect, and one of his arms was broken. Although there was no pain, it looked awkward. "I'm so miserable." When the time comes, no matter how miserable you are, you need to recover your body first. If nothing else, the natural resources and earthly treasures will always be enough, right? After the other party hung up the call, they looked at each other and immediately relaxed. They all breathed a sigh of relief, and the somewhat solid atmosphere was gone. As long as the crisis is over, nothing can be said. With the power and financial resources behind them, let alone a few large spaceships to visit the isolated city, even if they let the large spaceships fly around the blue star, they can afford it. Of course, no one does this, Only idiots do this kind of thing. Li Hui calmed down and said to Chang Xiao, you can report the crisis to the federal side. I will contact Gukan and stop issuing disaster announcements. Chang Xiao nodded, and just as he was about to contact Director Yang from before, he suddenly felt a tremor under his feet, shaking violently. Not only him, but everyone felt it. The ground beneath his feet began to tremble uncontrollably. The amplitude was so great that the two bosses, Li Hui and Chang Xiao, almost fell down. What's going on? The two of them looked at the ground in shock, their eyes full of doubts. What happened? The vibration never stopped from the moment it started. The fragile ground was violently shaken, causing several huge cracks that spread for several kilometers. There was an earthquake. Earthquakes on planetary debris too? It shouldn't be. The geographical situation is different. When the ground began to shake, Ai Zyakui, who was silent and insignificant at a distance, turned into a shadow and escaped into the ground just to be on the safe side. Li Ke hugged Li Hui's thigh in panic. His father's strength could ignore the earthquake, but he couldn't. Other than that, no one noticed that Zhao Xingbang, who had been lying dead before, disappeared quietly. No one noticed when he disappeared, no one knew when he ran away. Of course, it was also the focus of other people's attention, not on him. Is this an earthquake? The ground was shaking wildly, and it seemed that it wasn't just around them. All the creatures on this fragment of the planet feel it. The ground is shaking. No. It's this fragment of planet that's shaking. The unstoppable shaking lasted for several minutes. A scene that is despairing, terrifying, and unbelievable happened. When it happened, Li Hui and Chang Xiao, who were standing on the edge of the planet fragments, and even Li Ke and Ai Zyakui, couldn't believe it. This was true. After the planet fragments trembled, they actually fell off. It was as if he had lost all control of his pulling force. It actually fell. The sky is falling apart. The first person to notice that the planet fragments were falling was Li Hui. He had a high level of cultivation and strong senses. He was standing on the edge of the planet fragments and felt directly that the star fragments were falling. The next second, Chang Jiao also felt it. He looked under the edge and saw at a glance that the planet fragments were falling down. Oh my God! Chang Jiao's eyes were filled with confusion, and he couldn't help but mutter, what did I see? A small planetary fragment actually fell? Real or fake? You're not lying, are you? Am I blind? He felt that he was no longer the all-powerful Peak Destiny Realm expert, but a confused middle-aged man. Li Hui and Chang Hui glanced at each other, and both saw the fear and confusion in each other's eyes. At this moment, the two middle-aged men looked at each other like children. Li Hui said dryly, do you feel it? Chang Jiao nodded with difficulty, it seems like this planet fragment is falling. A person's brain may be crowded by them, or his eyes may be blind, and his senses may be disabled. But if two people are the same, then it can be determined. It's true. The sky is falling apart. The sky is falling. In an instant, their burly bodies trembled violently, their eyes darkened, and they almost fainted. The two of them would rather faint and then wake up without anything happening. They are both having nightmares. One of them is practicing in the mansion and the other is working in the office. This is perfect. Unfortunately, all of this is true. The two of them had the same cry in their hearts at the same time. The lonely city, the lonely city. Unlike Li Hui, who had stayed in Gukan for more than 10 years, Chang Jiao was on the verge of tears. He had only been in Gukan for 3 months. If you have not achieved any political achievements, your life will be ruined. Damn it! Such a desperate scene made Chang Jiao unable to help but say dirty words that were inappropriate for his status. When the Omega sublight fell before, the two tried their best to stop it, so they had to ask the Federation for help to pull people. Fortunately, Two little guys used other means to teleport the Omega sublight away. Who knew that before I could be happy for a minute, something even more desperate happened. The sky is falling. The sky is really falling. Who can stop the falling of planetary fragments? No one can resist this. Lonely city, a veritable city of orphans. Why? Why is this happening? It shouldn't be like this. How could planet fragments fall? This is unrealistic. Such a scene made Li Hui, who had lived for decades, very shocked and confused. The solar system had been shattered for 100 years, and there was no case of planet fragments falling. Chang Jiao took a deep breath, breathed it out again, repeated it several times, suppressed the shock and panic in his heart, and spoke in an uncertain tone. The energy and vitality of this planetary fragment have been drained by the Omegan light. Whether it is mass or aura, it has been weakened by 90%. The reason why it has always existed before is because the Omegan light is still there, supporting this piece of planetary debris, the operation of planetary fragments. But now, the Omega light is gone, and the planet fragment has no support, so it falls. This is the conclusion that Chang Jiao came up with after racking his brains. But now they are still saying that these are useful. The question is what to do. Is there any solution? Very hopeless. Don't even think about it, there is no solution. Not to mention the two peak destiny realms, even if the three disaster realms come, they can't solve it. Even the three disaster realms cannot destroy an entire planet fragment. This planetary fragment is destined to fall into Lonely City. No. Not an isolated city. But the fragment of the blue star that gave birth to the Lonely City is up. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Why are all of them passive skills? Author, Bouletin G. Bayet. Chapter 118. There was silence for a long time, and the air around him seemed to have solidified. The atmosphere was very depressing, and his heartbeat was beating very fast. After a long time, Chang Jiao coughed twice and said, "Actually, there is not much difference. A dragon-level disaster is still a dragon-level disaster, that's right." Li Hui nodded sullenly. Chang Jiao added, "Actually, there is not much difference. Whether it is Omega sublight or planetary fragments that fall, it is the same. The isolated city will be destroyed." Li Hui nodded with a dark face. Chang Jiao said again, "Actually, it doesn't make much difference. Anyway, the large spaceship is here, so it can't be in vain. The citizens still have to pick it up. Besides, it's better this time, and there will definitely be enough time." Li Hui looked at Chang Jiao with a look of despair. "Are you business people so big-hearted? Is this a case of looking away? Can the falling of Omega sublight and the falling of planetary debris be the same? The Omega sublight fell and smashed a city to death, but the land was still there. It could be rebuilt after cleaning up. A few years later, there was another orphan city. But what about falling planetary debris? A small planet fragment directly hit the blue star fragment in Gukan. How can I clean it up? It directly covered the blue star fragments, and there was no chance to stand up. It's over. Blue star is not big to begin with, and after the split, every piece of local land fragments is of immeasurable value. Except for allowing Warcraft to occupy one piece and becoming the Warcraft domain, no piece of local land has been released. It's great now. Not only is the isolated city gone, but the mainland is also gone. Nothing is left." Li Hui looked at Chang Jiao with a strange look on his face and motioned to him, "Stop talking and report it. It is really impossible to force two experienced bosses to this point." Chang Jiao's body froze, and he cursed the old fox in his heart. Why is it the Federation I contacted? Since he was the one who contacted me before, there was no chance to change, so I had no choice but to contact Director Yang again. A few seconds later, Director Yang's voice came out from the communicator. What's wrong? We've already passed Zhangcheng. We can reach Gukan in an hour at most. Chang Jiao held back and didn't know what to say. After hesitating for a long time, he spoke. Director Yang, don't worry, drive slowly, we'll make it in time. Director Yang was startled for a moment, then said in surprise, what happened? Could it be that the dragon-level disaster has been solved? As the management director of the Federation, Director Yang naturally does not want high-level disasters to occur, and it is best to resolve them peacefully. Chang Jiao coughed twice and said in denial, no, it's more serious, but now we have enough time. It will be about 3 hours until the planetary fragments fall. There is plenty of time. Director Yang, dot. After silence, Director Yang asked in a deep voice, I still don't know what kind of disaster happened in your isolated city. It's best to tell me so that we can make other preparations. Chang Jiao was very smart and directly concealed the Omega sublight that appeared before, as well as his and Li Hui's faults. Anyway, we have reached this point and can't be stopped, so let's move on to the point that is beneficial to ourselves. Bar. A small floating planet fragment was found right above Gukan. When the city owner and I went up to check, something unexpected happened. The entire planet fragment began to fall. It is expected that it will hit Gukan in 3 hours. Just such a short sentence made Director Yang's brain short-circuit. Director Yang said in shock, what did you say? Planet fragments fell. Chang Jiao responded, yes. Director Yang confirmed again, you mean, a piece of planetary debris floated just above Gukan very coincidentally, stopped very coincidentally, and then fell down very coincidentally. Even after having known each other for a long time, his expression did not change, yes. Li Hui on the side twitched the corner of his mouth slightly, thinking that he was so thick-skinned when he was playing business. Not only is he thick-skinned, but he also has a dirty heart. Call. Director Yang's heavy breathing came from the communicator, and it took a long time to calm down. I understand, we will investigate after the truth, and now we focus on relocating citizens. Time passed, and more than 40 minutes passed in the blink of an eye. Yejing was falling faster and faster. Below, he could clearly see the land fragments. If he looked carefully, he could still see the lonely city in the center of the land fragments. However, he did not panic at all, and he did not feel nervous at all. Possess unique skills and take his time. At this time, it would be different if a meteorite flew from somewhere and was smashed out by War of War. We're almost home. Yejing sighed. He had been wandering outside for more than 10 days and couldn't eat well or sleep well. He missed his home very much now. He missed the soft mattress at home, the delicious food and ice-cold drinks at home. After arriving in Gukan, the first thing to do was to go home, have a good sleep, and wait for the generous rewards mentioned by the city lord. Anyway, the crisis has been resolved, so there is no need to worry or panic. He doesn't know yet. After the crisis was resolved, another desperate crisis emerged. The falling Omega sublight was taken away by him at great cost, and another planetary fragment fell down. The speed of its fall was extremely fast. He thought he would be able to see it soon after he arrived at Gukan. Gray, who was following behind him, was no longer in a hurry, and drifted down with Yejing. He couldn't fly anymore, so he retracted his wings, hoping to save some energy by opening them when he was almost there. His back was stiff, and even though his wings were inside his body, he could still feel the pain. Not only was his back stiff, but his lower body was also stiff. He had taken 3 bottles of aphrodisiacs in a row, and he was almost immortal. 10 minutes later. It's almost there. Yejing's head rushed down, and his eyes lit up. He could clearly see the appearance of the lonely city. The place where he fell was exactly in the center of the lonely city. He looked around and saw a long line of giant dragons in the direction of the South City, moving towards the outside of the South City. The tail of the team was almost outside the South City. It seemed that it would not take long for everyone to be transferred to a safe place. However, Yejing was also a little confused. Hadn't he already told the city lord and the others that the crisis was over? Why were they still transferring the citizens? This thought only flashed through his mind, and he forgot about it. Maybe it was such a major event, and he still didn't trust them. In any case, it was always right to transfer the citizens first. A few minutes later, getting closer and closer to the ground, Gray had already spread his wings and flew up. He said to Yejing, "Do you want me to try to touch you again?" Yejing looked at the light particles surrounding the broken arm. There were only 2 left, so he shook his head. "No, I can do it. 1,000 meters. 500 meters. 300 meters. 100 meters. Boom. A loud noise. Yejing landed. Why are all of them passive skills? Author, Bulletin G. Bayet. Chapter 119. Outside Nanjing is a large wasteland that has never been used by anyone. There is a very large open space that can accommodate crowds. At this time, most of the hundreds of thousands of citizens in Quanggu City had already lined up to leave the city and came to the wasteland outside the city. Originally, based on the size of the southern city gate, it would take at least several hours to pass through hundreds of thousands of people. But fortunately, Wang Hai was resourceful and had strong coping skills. He immediately dispatched a law enforcement team and smashed all the walls of Nanjing, directly paving a road for citizens to pass. It is precisely because of this that the citizens moved very quickly, and now most of the citizens have left the city. Hundreds of thousands of people gathered together in a dark, chaotic, and noisy area, which was very noisy. What the hell is going on? They got us out without saying anything. My child is still in the city. Let the law enforcement team go and look for it for me. Where's the disaster? Didn't you say there was a disaster? Why can't you see it yet? I'm very curious. Has the spaceship to pick you up not arrived yet? The efficiency of the Federation is really getting lower and lower. In the chaos, all kinds of voices and faces were revealed. The fear they had when they sounded the alarm may have long been forgotten. Wang Hai, who was standing at the front, frowned tightly. Facing so many ordinary citizens, he didn't know what to do. Just when he was about to speak via loudspeaker, suddenly, the crowd fell silent. They all looked towards the sky in one direction. Follow their gaze. What is that? The giant steel beast that covers the sky and the sun is slowly approaching from a distance. The sky suddenly darkened, and the entire sky was covered. The behemoths in the sky flew towards their direction from the east, shocking everyone's vision. How long is the iron behemoth? At a glance, it is about 1,000 meters long, but I don't know whether it is 1,000 meters or 2,000 meters. How wide is the steel behemoth? At first glance, it is at least 700 or 800 meters wide. The steel behemoth is covered in black steel on the outside, and surrounded by hundreds of cannons. At the very front of the steel behemoth stands a large electromagnetic gun measuring several meters in length, width, and height. This is its main gun. This is a large spaceship of the Federation. Its full name is Strategic Class Anti-Weapons Airship. This kind of airship can carry tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people at a time, and has a huge internal space. There were hundreds of thousands of citizens in the isolated city reported this time. To be on the safe side, the Federation dispatched 10 airships to transfer the citizens. Of course, the Federation doesn't care about the funds. All expenses must be borne by Chang Tian Group and Li Wangcheng. They are only responsible for picking up people. When the 10 airships arrived at Gukhan, they stopped. The entire sky was covered, nothing could be seen, and it was airtight. Such a huge behemoth suddenly appeared in the eyes of a group of country bumpkins. All the citizens were immediately shocked. They looked at the sky blankly and did not dare to speak. Some brave young people took out their mobile phones and started taking photos to post on their WeChat moments. Some even started live broadcasts. When the airship stabilized the huge body, each airship suddenly opened wide and shot 13 silver elevators downwards. There are not 13 silver elevators in total, but 13 silver elevators shot down from each airship, for a total of 130 elevators. Then, a group of people stepped off the empty ship at the front. In the crowd, a group of big men in black surrounded a middle-aged man. They were professional bodyguards. The middle-aged man in the middle was dressed in formal clothes, with steady steps and a calm face. When he saw hundreds of thousands of citizens, there was a slight fluctuation in his eyes. The city lord and deputy city lord were both absent. Wang Hai, as the commander-in-chief, stepped forward first. After giving a solemn courtesy to the middle-aged man, he said in a deep voice, "Hello, Director Yang, I am currently the highest-ranking person in Gukhan Wang Hai." Director Yang glanced at the citizens, then looked at Wang Hai, nodded and said, "I have learned the general situation from your city lord. Without further ado, let's arrange for the citizens to board the airship." "Yes." Wang Hai shouted loudly, straightened his back, turned around, took a huge loudspeaker from his entourage, and shouted loudly toward the citizens. "Attention all citizens. Now line up to board the skyship, pay attention to safety. Don't crowd." He was not very good at talking. After saying only one sentence, he removed the loudspeaker and gave orders to all the staff in Gukhan. "Attention everyone, transport citizens into the airship. Pay attention to personal safety. Under special circumstances, all troublemakers are allowed to enforce the law first and then report." "Yes." In addition to the law enforcement team, other scattered staff from Gukhan have arrived, totaling thousands of people. But arranging hundreds of thousands of citizens with thousands of staff is not an easy task. As for Director Yang, because it was an emergency and the time was urgent, he didn't bring many people here, only some staff responsible for the operation of the airship. Director Yang watched expressionlessly as the citizens slowly boarded the ship. He didn't say anything or intervene, he just watched. Generally speaking, federal directors will not directly intervene in the government affairs of local cities. Firstly, the forces in each city are complicated, and secondly, they are afraid of uniting small teams. Also, don't think that the director who governs the entire federation has a high status. Tell me a number. The entire federation has 108 directors, not many, but not many. 90% of these 108 directors are standing in front of large forces. Above the directors, there are 9 permanent directors, who are the real power holders who control and manage the entire federation. 8 of the 9 permanent directors are from super large groups. 108 directors. 9 permanent directors. There is one more. The chairman of the federation. The highest official in Blue Star. Just as Director Yang was watching the citizens boarding the airship, a figure suddenly appeared from behind him, standing behind Director Yang and whispering. According to the images from the space satellite, there is indeed a small planetary fragment falling directly above the Lonely City, and it is expected to fall into the Lonely City in an hour and a half. Really? Director Yang's pupils shrank, and although his face did not change, his heart trembled violently. Is there really such a strange thing? He glanced at the citizens and frowned slightly. 1.5 hours, is it still in time? Director Yang suddenly stepped forward and walked to Wang Hai's side, and asked in a deep voice, "Are there any citizens who have not come out of the Lonely City now?" Wang Hai shook his head, "I'm not sure. I have already sent 2 law enforcement teams to search the Lonely City. All the citizens who are separated will be notified to come here. Is it fake? If you say fake, deduct 1 from your score below. Why are all of them passive skills? Author, Bulletin G. Bayet. Chapter 120. Director Yang calculated the time in his mind and said in a serious tone, search for 1 more hour. After 1 hour, withdraw all personnel. After 1.5 hours, the planetary fragments will fall into the lonely city, and there is only 1 hour and 20 minutes left for the airship to leave the falling area. For the safety of hundreds of thousands of citizens, those citizens who failed to come to take refuge for no reason can only give up first. Wang Hai nodded. He just turned around to leave, but suddenly remembered something and asked, Director Yang, what happened? He has been busy for so long, and he still doesn't know what is going to happen. Director Yang was slightly startled, looked up at the sky, and sighed, the sky is falling. On the other side, in the empty lonely city, a black shadow fell from the sky. Boom! With a loud bang, a large pit several meters deep was smashed into the ground. That is, the lonely city is now empty, otherwise people would think it was a meteorite falling. Dust splashed and fell, and gravel hit the surroundings. Trigger the War of Sorrow, immune to this fatal damage, and gain 100% damage bonus, 100% strength bonus, 100% speed bonus, 30% blood sucking when attacking, lasting for 1 minute. Yejing fell in the air for several hours. Finally landed. Cough cough cough. Due to the triggering of the War of Sorrow, Yejing was unscathed. After a few violent coughs, he climbed out of the deep pit with a dusty face. The first thing Yejing did after climbing out of the pit was to look around. Looking at the streets that were slightly familiar but seemed a little strange, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Finally, I'm back. Being messed up by those big guys, I have been floating on the small planetary fragments for more than 10 days. I didn't eat well and sleep well. Now I have returned to the lonely city. I am so tired. There are too many accidents on the small planetary fragments, so many that the exam can't be carried out normally. Having said that, this exam must be cancelled, but I don't know whether it will be re-examined or what. Following Yejing closely was Gray, who landed normally, flapping his wings and landing safely. After landing, Gray retracted his wings first and hurried forward to check on Yejing's condition. How are you? Gray said anxiously. Yejing shook his body, shook his head, and said, I'm fine. After replying, he looked at his missing arm and couldn't help but smile bitterly, it's this arm, I don't know how to recover it. Arm. Gray was slightly stunned, and put his eyes on Yejing's missing arm, and then looked at Yejing's white hair and old skin, and suddenly remembered something. He hurriedly flipped through his storage bracelet, took out a gold bottle from it, and handed it to Yejing carefully and gently. Here, you take it and drink it first. What is this? Yejing took the gold bottle and asked in confusion. Gray looked at the golden bottle, his eyes showing pain, but when he thought of the harvest in the future, most of which were brought to him by Yejing, he still held back his pain and pretended to be generous. This is the life spring water produced in the water realm, which is a specialty of the new human race, the elves, used to restore vitality and recover from injuries, and is extremely rare. Life spring water? New human race? Elves? What are these? Yejing was confused when he heard it, but when he heard about recovering injuries, his eyes suddenly lit up, and he couldn't wait to open the golden bottle. After looking into the bottle, he was disappointed. Why is there only 1 drop? Gray's eyelids jumped, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. 1 drop? Do you know how expensive this drop is? You can't afford it even if you sell your whole family. Yejing was speechless. Why did this sound so awkward? Is this thing really so expensive? Yejing was about to drink the life spring water, but suddenly thought of something, his face straightened, and his expression suddenly became solemn. What's wrong? Gray saw Yejing's change and couldn't help wondering. Yejing didn't reply to him, but took out his mobile phone, facing himself, and took 3 selfies, taking pictures of his current appearance. After taking the selfie, Yejing looked at the photo with satisfaction and murmured, "This is good, at least there is evidence of the tragic situation." Gray, dot. Brother, 666. He drank it all in one go. When the drop of life spring water entered the body, he felt the change instantly. The cool throat, the originally exhausted body instantly became energetic, the fatigue was swept away, and the dry spiritual energy in the body surged up. The skin all over the body felt numb, and in the blink of an eye it returned to its previous tenderness. The white hair was like a magic trick, instantly dyed black. The vitality that was previously taken away by the Omega sublight was replenished again. Not only that, his broken arm also felt a sharp numbness, and an arm was reborn, exactly the same as before. It's amazing. Yejing looked at his changed self, his eyes sparkling, looking at Gray like a hungry wolf seeing delicious food. Yejing's eyes made Gray feel uncomfortable, his whole body trembled, and he asked strangely, "What do you want to do?" Yejing swallowed his saliva. "Life fountain, is there any more? Give me another drop." When Gray heard that it was for the spring of life, he shook his head vigorously. "No more, no more. I took this by force when I ran out of the house before, so I'll give it to you 1 drop at a time." "Just 1 drop?" Yejing said in disappointment that it would be a pity to only have 1 drop of such a magical life-saving artifact. In the future, he must get some to save his life. Next. Yejing looked around, recalled the map of Gukan, and headed in one direction, which was the direction of his own home. "Let's go. You've been flying with me for a few hours. Let's go to my house and rest for a while." Tired, all tired, busy for several hours, not only physically tired, but also mentally tired. The place where they fell was quite far from his home. At their walking speed, it would probably take more than an hour. Yejing also wanted Gray to fly him home, but unfortunately Gray's wings were too tired to flap. There were no tram rentals running in the city, so I had to walk home. The two of them wandered lazily towards Yejing's house. They don't know yet. A surprise will fall from the sky soon. An hour later. The sky suddenly darkened. This time it was truly covering the sky and blocking out the sun. What's wrong? It's suddenly dark. Yejing and Gray looked at each other, confused, and then they subconsciously looked up at the sky. In an instant, his mouth opened, his eyes widened with fear, and his face was confused and shocked. "Oh my God! Why did it come down?" Yejing murmured with dull eyes. A look of despair. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Why are all of them passive skills? Author, Bouletin G. Bayet. Chapter 121. What is this? What the hell is this? Yejing looked up at the sky. He could no longer see the sky. The sky was blocked and the sun was blocked. He looked to the southeast, northwest, and all he could see was the black land, pressing down from above. The distance between the two sides seemed to be so close that they would be suppressed in the next second. Not only Yejing was dumbfounded, but Gray on the side was also dumbfounded. He tilted his neck back and raised his head high, with a confused look on his face. How did it come down after it? Who knows this? Yejing rubbed his eyes vigorously, trying to see if he was too tired and had hallucinations. After closing his eyes tightly for a few seconds, he opened them nervously, raised his head, looked desperate, and said in a dry tone, "Why are you still here? Planet fragment, dot. This is reality. Not an illusion. The planet fragments directly above the lonely city fell together behind them. Moreover, no one has notified us yet. OMG. Are all the city lords dead? Can't you even send a text message? Could it be that we are going to be beaten to death because we don't want to be paid? Are people's hearts so dark? Of course, he didn't know, he simply forgot about the two of them. Run. Gray's whole body trembled suddenly, and he shouted loudly like a rooster crowing. He subconsciously stretched out his tired wings and wanted to fly into the sky. Then he was pulled down by Yejing. Why do you still want to hit me? Gray's face was ashen and he was still struggling. Run. If you don't run, it will fall down. Yejing stretched out his finger, pointed to the sky above, and circled around with a passive and pessimistic expression. You run? Where can you run? Have you forgotten how big this planet fragment is? We are up there. Stayed for more than 10 days. Yes. I can't run at all, nor can I fly. The area of this planetary fragment is not small, and it can completely cover and suppress the land fragments of the entire isolated city. Can they escape in such a short time? Impossible. They can't fly? No, it can fly, but it can't fly out. Suddenly, Gray's dead eyes flashed with life, as if he had seen some life-saving straw. He pulled Yejing over and pointed to the horizon. Look over there. What's wrong? Yejing was confused and looked in the direction Gray pointed. A light of hope instantly appeared on his desperate face. There was hope. The two of them could only see it before because the planetary debris was pressing down and blocking the sky. In the sky outside Nanjing, there are 10 steel behemoth-like airships floating in the sky. This is used to transport citizens. At this time, Yejing suddenly realized that no wonder the disaster announcement had not been lifted and the citizens had not returned to the city. It turned out that they had known about the falling planet fragments for a long time. It turns out we were the last to know. Human hearts are so dark. Fortunately, the two of them saw the empty ship and had a chance to survive. Hurry over. Yejing shouted fiercely and ran towards the outside of Nanjing. He spread his long legs and ran with his head raised. Desperate pressure from above came down from the sky, as if he was about to hit him in the next second. It's just like the lonely city. It's terrible. The way out is just ahead. As long as they run outside Nanjing and board the airship, with the speed of the airship, they will definitely be able to avoid the planetary debris. This is the only chance of survival they can think of now. However, imagination is beautiful, reality is cruel. Just when Yejing started running and had not run a few hundred meters, he suddenly stopped and looked at the empty ship outside Nanjing with a desperate look on his face, muttering something in his mouth. Don't fly away. Just as the two of them started to take off, the empty ship flew away. The steel behemoth spewed out white smoke, deafening roars continued, and the silver-white elevator hung high. A flash of smoke. Flew away. Not a single one of the 10 empty ships was left behind. They all flew away, taking with them hundreds of thousands of citizens in the isolated city. Among these hundreds of thousands of citizens, Yejing and Gray were not included. What now? Gray was stunned, his whole body was numb, and the cooked duck flew away. No, this is wrong, the pot should have flown and the duck stayed. What should we do? Yejing was also confused. The only hope was that he would fly away. What should he do? He now regrets using Sorrow of War. If he still has Sorrow of War, he doesn't know how it can withstand the crushing force of a planetary fragment. Should. No problem. Unfortunately, there is nothing left now. I can only wait to die. The shadows in the sky were getting closer and closer. The city will be destroyed when the black land presses upon it, and it will be destroyed with him. What should I do? The planetary fragments getting closer and closer in the sky weighed on the hearts of the two of them. Gray was spinning in circles, unable to think of any way to save himself, and kept talking about what to do. What to do? I'm desperate too. Yejing forced down the panic in his heart, frowning and thinking about the chance of survival. Then, when his eyes glanced inadvertently, his pupils suddenly lit up. Scan something. A dog hole. Yes. I know what to do. Yejing hammered his fist with one hand and thought of a way. What can I do? Gray grabbed Yejing's shoulders with excitement and shook violently. He still had some youth to waste, a lot of aphrodisiacs to drink, and a lot of assets waiting for him to inherit. How could he die here? Stop, stop, stop. Don't shake. Yejing pulled Gray away and pointed at the dog hole and said, Look at that dog hole, what can you know? Gray said with a strange look on his face, Do you think a dog hole can protect the two of us? Or find another dog hole? Yejing, dot. What an idiot. Yejing had no choice but to take out the dragon tooth knife, poke the ground, and explain, We can dig a deep hole, a very deep hole, and then hide in it, so that we won't be hit by the planetary debris. It can only hit the surface when it falls, not the ground. Oh. Gray suddenly realized, he looked at the tools in Yejing's hand, and then took out a thin sword from his storage bracelet, a very thin one, just like the Western sword used in fencing competitions. What else is there to say? Dig. The deeper the better. Time waits for no one. There is no time to lose. Yejing took a deep breath, held the dragon tooth knife, raised his hands, and slashed at the ground fiercely. The dragon tooth knife made of black gold hit the ground directly. Bang! A muffled sound. Yejing's arms were numb from the shock, and only a small pit about 10 centimeters deep appeared on the ground. The ground of this lonely city is completely different from the shabby ground on the planetary fragments. Why are all of them passive skills? Author, Bulletin G. Bayet. Chapter 122. Blue Star's land mass is still strong. Even if it was dug out, it would be a lot more difficult. If it were on a planetary fragment, a blow would make a hole half a meter deep at least. But on Blue Star Lonely City, there can only be such a shallow trace, which is really uncomfortable. I can't control that much now, it's more important to save the dog's life. Yejing struck down with one blow, raised his hand with another blow, and hit the ground back and forth. Within a minute, a 2-meter deep pit appeared in front of him. I'm so tired of this. Yejing exhaled, wiped the sweat from his head, turned to look at Gray, and couldn't help but have a dark look on his face. You have your ears pierced. Look over at Gray, who is stabbing the ground with the point of his rapier. What kind of point is that? An inch-wide point. After poking for a minute, a thin sword was almost inserted to the end, and then what? Just a small hole 1 inch wide. This is smaller than an ear piercing. It's a matter of life and death, and you're kidding me across the street. Gray looked at his pierced ears, compared them with Yejing's 2-meter deep piercing, and smiled awkwardly. I don't know how to do it. You don't know how to dig holes, don't you know how to watch people dig holes? Yejing suddenly swung his dragon fang, and a pale white spiritual energy swept the sword wind and slashed into the pit. In an instant, the soil splashed and the pit became a few centimeters deeper. If you don't know, just cut it blindly. Yejing pointed at Gray and asked him to jump down too. 2 people would be faster than 1 person. Subsequently, the light of the sword and the shadow of the sword slashed wildly, the spiritual energy surrounded the dust and flew, and the violent dragon's fangs, coupled with the thin sword, slashed into the deep pit with one sword after another. Gradually, the 2 of them were getting faster and faster. Not long after, when the 2 of them came back to their senses, they looked up and compared. They found that it was about 20 meters deep. Stop, stop, stop. Yejing grabbed Gray, who was lowering his head and slashing, and asked him to stop. What's wrong? What's wrong? Gray raised his rapier and asked doubtfully. Yejing pointed to the top and said, "The depth is enough, it's time to dig a hole." With the strength of Blue Star's ground, even if the planetary fragments fall, they will be destroyed less than 20 meters deep underground. But only the depth is not enough. In a pit of 20 meters, there is no place to hide if the rocks are smashed from the sky. They may be smashed to death by them. Yejing stretched out a hand, touched the wall of the pit, found a place where the soil was moist, inserted the dragon's tooth and made a circle. Then, he pointed at Gray and then at the circle. "Dig." "Oh." Gray responded stupidly and worked hard to dig out. The designer clothes he was wearing were already out of shape. They were dirty and messy, and he no longer looked like a nobleman. Gray dug stupidly. After digging for a while, he felt something was wrong. When he turned around, he saw that Yejing was concentrating with his eyes closed. He couldn't help but said angrily, "What are you doing?" Yejing rolled his eyes. "I'll take a rest." "Rest? You don't want to die? After you survive, I will ask you to take a good health care and rest for 10,000 days. Gray directly pulled Yejing up and urged him to dig a hole. Looking up now, I can no longer tell how close the planet fragments are. Below the planet fragments, the landmark is clearly visible, and the black earth and gravel fall from the sky and hit the isolated city. At this time, it is already doomed, the destruction of the lonely city. Dig a hole. The two of them worked together, men and women working together, and the work was quite tiring. Keep digging to survive. After the cave was dug about 10 meters deep, Yejing and Gray began to separate. Gray continued to dig deeper. Yejing, on the other hand, dug in both directions to expand the area and make a better living. About 10 minutes later, Yejing suddenly heard an exclamation and thought something had happened, so he hurriedly looked at Gray. "What's wrong?" Gray pointed a finger at the wall in front and stammered, "Dig, dig, dig through." "Yejing. What do you mean by digging through?" Yejing walked over, reached out and touched the wall, and suddenly looked shocked. I actually wore it." A hole appeared on the wall. On the other side of the hole, there was no soil and it was empty. "What's going on?" The two looked at each other and saw a trace of doubt in each other's eyes. Starting from Yejing, he split open the wall with only a thin layer of skin remaining. Behind the wall, the sound of water running came out, fresh air rushed in, and moisture surrounded him. Yejing looked around and suddenly looked embarrassed. "This is the underground river in the isolated city. So, why don't we find a sewer and crawl into it?" Gray suddenly said something. Instantly, there was an air of embarrassment in the air. Neither of them spoke. IQ is not enough. Why didn't I think of that at the time? After spending a long time digging a deep hole, I ended up with nothing. Is there an underground river in Gukan? There really is. But it's no use. Yejing stood in the hole he had dug so hard with his own hands and feet, stretched his neck and looked above the underground river. Empty. There is no solid ground. The entire area was hollowed out. After just one glance, Yejing stepped back, shook his head and said, "This underground river is not good, but our deep pit is the insurance. The top of the underground river has been hollowed out, and it is easy to be smashed directly. It was really terrible at that time. There's nothing left." "That's true, but now that it's hollowed out, what else can we do?" Gray asked. "What are you doing?" Yejing rolled his eyes at him, "waiting to die." Yejing sat down on the ground, exhausted. Now he could only leave it to fate and wait for the planet fragments to fall to see if he could save his life. Just then, Gray's communicator rang. He picked it up and saw that it was a text message. "Uncle Chang Chiao, planet fragments fell in Gukan, leave quickly. Gray. Yejing. There is a delay, so what?" What is the situation now? 10 airships have flown out of the Gukan area and docked more than 10 kilometers away from this piece of blue star fragments, waiting for the planet fragments to fall, and then rescue others. Li Hui and Chang Jiao have made the best preparations for the fall, and also protected Li Ke. No matter how big the impact is, they will be unscathed. Ai Xiaokui turned into a shadow and quietly hid underground, thinking about whether to pull Yejing into the organization. He felt that he was quite talented. On the semi-stone green lotus sculpture underground, sat a little girl with a little red hat. The crystal clear eyes looked into the distance, and the bare white and flawless little feet swayed, which was very cute. Finally. It's coming out. 1 minute passed. 3 minutes passed. 5 minutes passed. Then. Boom boom boom. A deafening sound that resounded through the sky and earth, piercing the clouds and cracking the rocks came out, spreading across half of the blue planet. The sound waves rippled, and nothing could be heard except for the loud noise, and the ears were buzzing. But they all knew what happened. Planet fragments fell. The lonely city was in ruins. At the same time, in the sky, white snowflakes fell on the ruins. December. It's coming. The first volume is finished. Thank you all for your subscription support. The second volume of the Castlevania chapter is ready to attack.